Okay, so my question to talk about today is how can digital gamification overcome disinterest? As soon as I can get the clicker to work. Great. Okay, so the opportunity may well be there to use gamification. So we know that we have to come up with strategies for particular behaviours. So we know that people need to do something. So if you're looking at alcohol reduction, we know that the behaviour is needed. But people don't necessarily care. So I could ask you all, how many people have had 8 hours sleep a night this week? Who's had their appropriate levels of fruit and veg, the minimal levels of alcohol, no tobacco, but I'm not asking for a show of hands because it's impossible for us to do all of these things all of the time. And even if we're motivated, then we don't necessarily actually engage or care. And generally, we have an interest in it when the relevance is high. So when you go to put on that outfit you haven't worn for a year, suddenly I might be really motivated to go and lose weight. But if all the other clothes fit it, the rest of the time I may not. So we have disinterest in a behaviour that is directly relevant to us because it's difficult to do. Or the competition is more appealing. You know, I've packed a bag many a time to get up to go to the gym the night before, set my alarm, and then just turned it off because it's too dark, it's too whatever. And I've done everything I could, I've got the gym membership, and it's just not going to happen because sleeping in is far more appealing. There's often a time lag for results. You know, you do something now and it takes so long to pay off that it just isn't reinforcing enough. Or we just think, oh, it's not wildly relevant, I'll deal with it when there's a crisis or a problem hits. And the bottom line is there's a lack of value proposition in it for us. And so one of the first things that we've got to think about with gamification or with digital is what's the value proposition for people and how do we overcome all of those barriers that create the disinterest? So why digital? Well, to start with, it's everywhere. So I can get this working. You can quit your job by SMS, just choose an option and it'll text your boss. You can keep track of the gifts that you give your various girlfriends or boyfriends and make sure that you refer to the right gift to the right person. You can become an irresistible gentleman with this particular website that can help give you tips on how to dress, what to say, where to go, what to do. This is a great campaign. It was Condom My Weight in Sweden that basically had a QR code on the back of a condom that you could then get an app. The app you turned on when you engaged in sex, it gauged your frequency, your intensity, your volume, uploads all the information to a website and then prints out all kinds of interesting statistics about blondes or about people who like rock and roll. And the idea was it was to stimulate conversation and the use of condoms. And it worked really well. You could actually have your personal chart printed on a t-shirt if you wanted it. We have knitting forums. So we have lots of special interest groups that you can engage with digitally. Message boards. You can even remember or be reminded of when to drink water. So there is digital everywhere. So if you're not at least considering digital, then you're not actually in the game of behaviour change. So the question is, if you're going to pick digital, what's the strategic imperative and how do you do it properly? You don't just do a website because everybody else is. It's got to have a purpose. So looking then at the micro level of gamification, it's basically the combination of entertainment plus information leads to customer engagement, and it's a big field. Globally, it's worth about $2.8 billion. Gamification is not the same as games, and there is a distinction. And gamification is all about using game-like elements in leaderboards or tracking, but it's not actually gameplay. How do games affect our brains? So there's a whole science around this field, and this is a really simple view of how it works. Consumers are hardwired for play, for leisure. There's a fundamental interest that we have in that area. Games provide psychological payoff. So the self-determination theory tells us it gives us autonomy, mastery, and social interaction. So you can automatically see the customer value proposition just from the games. They facilitate behaviour through motivating, through providing opportunity, and by building our ability for using simulation. And the way that it affects our brains is through the limbic system, which sits right in the core of our brain. So games create an emotional connection by stimulating this limbic system, and when you have emotions, that actually strengthens memories and learning. So if we're about getting people to remember and to learn something, if you can do that through the emotion pathway, it's actually a stronger connection. And that's where games can come in to start overcoming some of this disinterest. It also produces really important hormones, so the feel-good hormones of serotonin and dopamine, and it actually stimulates us to go back. So in the same way that when we get pleasure from an activity, when we laugh, you can get that through the games or gamification, and that then gets connected through conditioning to our brand or to our behaviour. And there's research that shows when we get rewarded, and it can even be a gold star, that stimulates dopamine, and we go back and back and back again. So there's a whole science around this that starts to help us understand how we can overcome that disinterest. So why do they like gamification? They like it through because it gives competitive motivation. It rewards us for good behaviour. It helps us to participate through reviews and quality. It allows us to connect with other people, and we really like that social connection. So one of the examples, well, the example I'm going to give you is a program we did in energy called Reduce Your Juice. And this was a digital social marketing program which we had delivered through smartphone platforms. It's free to download on both Android and iPhone. This was part of a larger digital program funded by the federal government in Australia for $6.5 million. So we needed to make sure we had a fair amount of science and rigour around this program to see if we could change the energy efficiency behaviour of low-income renters in Australia through doing this. And we went with a behavioural learning approach where we got people to act first, then they felt, and then they learnt. So this was not about creating information, this was not about backfilling knowledge. This was just do something, and then you will experience feelings, and then you will learn, and then the outcome will be attitude change. And we used Doug Mackenzie Moore's community-based social marketing to identify 3 modifiable behaviours that renters could do that would have an impact on their bill. And we designed 3 games, one for each of those behaviours, that was fun and engaging, that really hooked people in, and used our little avatars who were the Watt family. So you could be Kilowatt the dog as your avatar, you could be Milliwatt, you could be Peter Watt, Megawatt, and you chose the character, and then you interacted. You then were required to do activities in the real world to then channel that back through. And we rewarded people throughout the process intrinsically through the game and leaderboards, as well as externally through energy efficient appliances. And we measured a whole bunch of stuff around this, including their kilowatt use through the electricity company. So if you're thinking about using digital, or you're thinking specifically about gamification, you need to think about where does it fit strategically in what you're doing. For us, we had the major barrier that nobody cares about electricity until the bill arrives, and then it's a big flurry and everyone turns lights off, and then no one cares for the next 2 months until the next bill came. So we used games as a way of engaging people to create that pleasure principle, and to then start the conversation within households between share and flatmates as well as parents to actually take it that next step. And the measurements around it basically show that it worked really well. If anyone's interested in the outcome of that, one of my colleagues should have just tweeted the link to the project site, and you can go and look at it, and all the reports and information are up there for you. Thank you very much.